Hello and welcome to my free-to-play giant mole guide. On screen you can see all of the timestamps that I'm going to be using throughout the video, but if you would like clickable links you can look down into the description and use those for easy navigation. With that said, let's get into it. Part 1. Location. The mole is actually very conveniently located right next to a prayer altar as well as a lodestone. This is how you're going to be getting to the mole, and then for refilling food and hit points you're going to be using a bank. Now I am personally going to opt for using the clan Vexillum, but if you would like to, you can use either a Dungeoneering ring or a Skull of Remembrance. Pros and cons to them is the Skull of Remembrance is the quickest to a bank, and Dungeoneering is the longest to a bank, but it can be used in combat. It really doesn't matter because the difference is so minuscule, and if you really want to teleport out in combat, you're going to be using your Explorer's Ring most likely anyway. Part 2. Stats. So as you can see, the minimum is actually pretty low, and the thing is, you can do a kill, or possibly two if you're really stretching it at those levels, but it's really not worth doing outside of just having fun and doing maybe one or two off kills here and there. If you're going to be actively camping this boss, it is absolutely worth your time to go train your skills, get them up to about 90 or so before taking on an extended stay at the giant mole. Part 3. Action bar. So this might be slightly controversial because there are a few people out there who go absolutely above and beyond what it takes to do the norm, and they micromanage their abilities like crazy. So this ability bar is really the most optimal that it can be without going full manual and doing those very small micromanages just to get maybe 5 to 10% more DPS. So realistically, you should keep to this bar unless you're somebody who knows the ins and outs of every single ability. The most important things here though is you're going to need to have things like Flurry and Hurricane so that you can AoE. You're going to need Destroy and Stomp to stun them all, and then you're obviously going to need Anticipation and Freedom to break free of stuns. You also want to have Protect from Melee up in a very easily accessible area so that you can pray whenever the mole is actually attacking you. Part 4. Equipment. Now before we get into the specific equipment, you should note that you should always have 3 Tuska pieces or War Priest pieces. This does not include Ghost Hunter. And whenever you see Tuska on the degrade list, then you can assume that right after Tuska comes whatever War Priest you happen to have, and right after that comes Ghost Hunter, if applicable in any of these scenarios. So again, because you always want to have 3 pieces of Tuska or War Priest, your gloves and your boots are always going to be either Tuska or War Priest unless you don't have either of them, in which case you would get Rune Gloves and Rune Boots if you're a main account, or Fighting Boots if you are an Iron Man. So you're going to kind of have to configure your equipment for your own specific account, but just go off of what is on the degrade list here, and remember to, even if you have to switch out one of your pieces for a what is lower defense armor, it's worth doing if it's the 3rd piece of your Tuska or War Priest so that you can get the set effect. Part 5. Equipment. So the two-handed sword can really be an add your 2H sword if you can't be bothered with Dungeoneering. It's not too big of a deal, but you should probably use a Gravite 2H. The Twisted Bird Skull necklace is an absolute must if you want to have any prayer refilling between kills. Any shield will do, as you're not going to actually be fighting the mole while using rejuvenation if you ever need it. And then the banking method, it doesn't really matter between the Vex, the DG ring, or the Skull of Remembrance. Spices are optional so long as you have the amount of food in your inventory times 50 greater than the amount that one piece of food heals. It's worth using. And the thing is, you really don't want to be using like swordfish or anything like that for this, because as you are going to see, salmon works more than enough. I get more than enough healing out of salmon, and it's extremely cheap for mains and extremely easily obtainable for Iron Man. Part 6, Mechanics. So this is just a quick overview before we get into each individual phase more in depth in just a minute, but what you do need to know here is that it always starts on phase 1, always ends on phase 6, and then 2, 3, 4, and 5 are randomized as in when each one of them is going to come out. You notice which one is going to come next by how the mole digs. There's an animation that you'll see in just a minute here that shows you which direction the mole is going to be going towards, which indicates what phase it's going to be on. So in phase 1, nothing special happens, you basically just kill it. In phase 2, it spawns moles and becomes more resistant to your attacks while the moles are up. And then in phase 3, it will dig a rocky ground around you that will damage you extremely quickly. In phase 4, it goes berserk, hitting a lot higher damage, but it allows stuns so that you can quell it. And then in phase 5, it binds you under a cave-in, so it's kind of like phase 3, but you aren't able to move when the damage is happening. And then in phase 6, all of them are combined, and all of those mechanics can happen at once. In every single phase, there's also a sort of mechanic to stop you from safe spotting the boss, and it allows the mole to do what phase 3 does, but only if the mole is not able to attack you at any point in time. For phase 1, you should start with a slaughter and then just basically wait until revolution kills her. It's a very simple and easy phase. But between kills, you should use your Twisted Bird Skull necklace to restore your prayer, and then you should stall your adrenaline using Anticipation, Freedom, and Devotion to be the last one so that you can get some of that damage reduction on the next kill. Also, you could just attack moles if you don't have some of those abilities or if they are on cooldown. During phase 2, after your first attack, she will immediately spawn her baby moles that you can use Flurry to kill. After the last one is dead by that AoE, then you can use Slaughter if it's off cooldown and try and get her down to her next phase before she spawns a second wave of baby moles. However, if she does happen to get a second spawn wave out, all you need to do is wait until they are within 1 square of you, switch to your 2H, and just use Hurricane to kill all of them. Phase 3 actually has a pretty interesting mechanic wherein you can make it so that the mole doesn't ever actually use her special for this phase by going to the northernmost tiles of that area within the cave. I will show you that in the game in just a minute here, but you can see on the map it is highlighted, and once you're in that position, all you have to do is wait for Revolution to hit her down to the next phase. Phase 4 is pretty easy. All you have to do is sit there and wait for Revolution to take her down, and then once the message pops up that says that the mole is now able to be stunned, all you gotta do is use Destroy, and it's gonna destroy her. Every once in a while, she will be a little bit resistant, and you're gonna get a little bit unlucky, wherein she will do it very quickly and get a second Berserk out. If that ever happens, all you got to do is stomp the second one, she'll get stunned again, and you'll be on your way. Phase 5 is definitely the hardest phase, obviously besides phase 6, but it takes some getting used to, and the trick here is to use Anticipation right before you use your first ability. If you do this correctly, Anticipation doesn't actually take any time at all, and it makes it so that every single time the mole uses her cave-in special, you will always be guaranteed to be anticipated at the time so that it doesn't ever actually stun you. And then right after you know that the cave-in is coming, you want to slaughter and start moving so that the mole is getting as much DPS on it as possible so that you hopefully are able to make it without having to deal with a second cave-in. If a second cave-in does happen, you have to use Freedom on that second one as soon as you get stunned, and so it's a little bit more difficult, but it's very doable, and after a few kills and getting to learn it a little bit more, you should get the hang of it. Phase 6 is your put it all together phase. You have to deal with phase 2, 3, 4, and 5 all at the same time. The only thing that's guaranteed in this phase is the first hit that you make on her, she's going to be spawning baby moles. So basically she's going to start on phase 2. But from that she can go to phase 3, phase 4, or phase 5. It's randomized. So you have to be on your toes here. And the one difference here is whenever she goes berserk, you want to always use stomp rather than destroy, which is the main difference, because you want to have destroy off of cooldown, because destroy and hurricane use the same cooldown, which means that after your first flurry, which is a guaranteed because again she starts on phase 2, you are basically going to be making yourself need to use hurricane for the second wave of baby moles that she spawns. And obviously if you use destroy, because they're on the same cooldown for the berserk phase, you're not going to be able to use hurricane for the second baby mole phase. It's a little bit confusing and it takes a little bit of getting used to, but just like everything else, with a little bit of practice you're going to be able to nail it down pretty quickly. And finally, part 13, the drops. Presumably the reason why you're here. So before we actually look at all of these, I want to make 2 points, that being, first of all, every single kill is guaranteed to drop 3 mole hides and 1 set of big bones. And then secondary, the numbing roots as well as the clingy moles are what is known as a tertiary drop. So every time you get a kill, you have a chance at getting either of these in addition to your main drop. So your 100% drop is the mole hides and the big bones, and then your 100% secondary drop is one of the following items on screen, and then your tertiary drop can or cannot be included, which would be either the numbing roots or the clingy moles. So on here, obviously the coins, not every single time you're going to be getting exactly 20k, but after, a few kills, a few drops of coins, it's going to average out to be right around there. Sometimes you get 18k, sometimes it's 22k. It's basically 20k every single kill. So off of that, we also sometimes get pure essence, iron ore, coal, adamant bars, U-logs, uncut diamonds, grapes, and limport roots. Now onto the live portion. I'm going to be showing the start of an entire trip up until the ending, the beginning of the second kill, so that you can basically run through the whole thing, and then obviously just repeat the kills before having to tele back out to the bank. Now the one thing that I want to know about banking here is, because I was full on prayer, I obviously didn't have to restore it. However, if I did, I would just run slightly northeast of where the Falador lodestone was and pray at the altar there. So here you see me starting my instance for the giant mole, and when your first kill is happening, you really just have to wait for it to spawn. Oh well, there's no adrenaline stalling or anything because you haven't built anything up at that point. So you start out, and I misclicked there, but I turned on my quick prayers, and so you can see I'm obviously praying melee. If you want to have ultimate strength on, you can, or whatever attacking prayer as well, but you don't necessarily have to. It's basically a minimum of protect from melee. However, here we go on to phase 2 because phase 1 is extremely simple, and we hit out flurry for the first wave of baby moles, and then we try and slaughter it so that we can hopefully get it down before the second wave comes. However, here you can see that obviously the second wave just spawned, so before immediately going into the 2H and using hurricane, I have to wait for the baby moles to come at least 1 square within where I'm standing so that hurricane will actually kill them all. And then here obviously you can see on the ground that the mole is indicating that it went on to phase 3, and what you want to do here is again slaughter into your little crevice there. So now where I'm standing, the mole cannot do her special attack for this particular phase, and it becomes just like phase 1, just sit there and let revolution do its work. Now on to phase 4 here. The most difficult of the phases besides phase 6. You see, I anticipated right before my first ability fired off there, and what that did was it allowed me to avoid this first stun under the cave-in. And also, as the stun, or not as the stun, but as the cave-in is happening, you want to continue doing as much DPS as possible so that you can avoid the second cave-in if she happens to do that. However, here, obviously, you can see I do get the second cave-in, and that time all you have to do is use freedom to break free from that stun. And then up here onto phase 5, all you have to do is pretty much wait for revolution, and then once you get the message, which you will see here in just a second right there, you can see the message saying the mole can now be stunned. Just you want to use destroy, and that will stun her, and very, very rarely again will you ever have to re-stun her on that one, but if you do, just use stomp instead of destroy for the second one. Now on to phase 6, and again on phase 6 you will always start with phase 2's special mechanic of spawning baby moles. So after your very first hit you want to use flurry, get all of the baby moles out, and here because she went into phase 5 directly after and allowed me to stun her, I wanted to use stomp rather than destroy, just in case hurricane would have to be used for a second round of baby moles. So she's dead now, and I switch over to my Twisted Bird Skull necklace, restore my prayer points, and obviously use freedom, anticipation, and devotion if you have it unlocked to stall your adrenaline between kills. And then once you're done restoring your prayer, switch back into your brawler's hook and just wait for her to spawn while, obviously continuing to stall your adrenaline. And then as soon as the next one spawns, go right into your slaughter and kick it off on phase 1 again. Repeat the process, bank whenever you need to, and restore your prayer points if you need to. So that was my guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.